Mojang recently broke reinforcement drowned farms, so I found a fix so you can once again easily get unlimited copper, tridents, nautilus shells, and more. The farm itself is pretty simple to build and use, but the technical mechanics behind it are very impressive. Hello there, Ray here, and I've been working on this automatic drown farm design for the last 7 years, but now is a perfect time to show it with the new changes. And those changes are, if you would hit a zombie mob, there was a chance of it spawning in another zombie nearby. And this is a trick that I used over 9 years ago to design the first working reinforcement farm. And when the drowned variations of the zombies were introduced, their reinforcements would also be the normal zombies. Now every time one of these zombies gets hit, their chances of producing more zombies gets reduced. And the reinforced zombies that they spawn in also have a reduced chance of producing reinforcements themselves. And with these two combined, it means that over time they will no longer produce more reinforcement spawns, preventing an infinite supply of zombies. But when normal zombies are converted into drowns by submerging them in water, the new drown mob that's created would have their information reset, allowing them once again to spawn in more reinforcements. And by using this, you can make an infinite source of zombies without having to introduce any outside zombies. But this all changed in Java 1.21.2. So now if you convert a normal zombie into a drown, it keeps all its previous information, including its reduced ability to spawn in more reinforcements. And with this change, it nerfed the ability to get an infinite source of zombies, which is what broke drown reinforcement copper farms. So I used my over 16 years of Minecraft game knowledge to find a workaround for this problem, with the first trick having to do with how reinforcements actually work. It all begins when the mob gets attacked. If it has a special attribution tag called spawn reinforcements, which is higher than the reinforcement callee charge tag, then there's a chance that this mob will spawn in reinforcements nearby. But where it spawns a zombie isn't always the same spot. There's actually a little bit of bias in certain directions and locations. This can be shown with this example where we just had the game summon in a piece of sand for every zombie spawned up above, and the sand would just drop down. And with the main zombie in the center, you can see that we had some sand end up in these quadrants here, but a lot of it was in the exact same location, which was directly in the 4 cardinal directions out from the initial zombie. Meaning that the game is more likely to try to place in a reinforced zombie in this little strip that's only 1 block wide, but about 40 blocks long. But the way the game checks to spawn in zombies is not as simple as just a 2-dimensional plane. So the actual way that the game puts the zombie reinforcements into the game is like this. It's kind of confusing and crazy looking. So the center spot here is where the mob that is actually calling the reinforcements. And most typically this would be a leader zombie that can actually summon in multiple reinforcements. And then when it takes damage, it's going to place in its reinforcements in one of these colored boxes areas. But notice they're colored different colors, and this is because they all have different chances of actually having the zombie spawn in that area. So when it summons in its reinforcements, it's going to spawn it typically between 7 and 40 blocks away from the initial zombie. So this clear glass represents the area where no zombies can actually spawn in because they're too close. So they won't spawn in a big circle around this area. But they also do not just spawn in all the rest of the area around it. As you can see, there is some gaps in between these. And this is due to the math that's being used where the mobs don't actually are able to spawn in these gaps. So despite the red areas taking up the majority of all the spots that the zombies can spawn in, there's actually only about a 30% chance that the zombies will actually spawn in the red area, with a 70% chance of it spawning in the other colors. Now the orange area is not as big as the red areas, but it actually has a higher chance of being chosen, being 44% of the time. And even though the yellow areas are a very small area, they still have a 22% chance of being chosen. With the last area being the green area, which is only a single block, that is right where the initial zombie is. But despite being just a single block, there's about a 4% chance of every single spawn actually choosing this block to place the zombie in among all of these blocks. Now to put that into perspective, the green block is 40,000 times more likely to be chosen than a single red block. And these different areas is what I took into account to decide exactly where to have the player attack the mobs. Therefore, we could predict where the reinforcements would try to spawn in And I try to make sure that the really high probability colored blocks are the areas where they can spawn within the farm, to give us the highest chance of getting a reinforcement after hitting a zombie. Because even though when a reinforcement is trying to get spawned in, it will check 50 different locations in hopes that one of them will actually be a location it can spawn into. So by using the areas that have a higher chance of having them spawn into them, we can end up using less blocks overall, but have the same percentage chance that the zombie will actually succeed in spawning compared to needing a whole bunch of like the red area. Now for a zombie, it needs a valid location to spawn on, so it has to be a solid top to block, as well as no light in this area in order for it to actually succeed. It also cannot collide with any blocks, that's why you would need to have 2 air blocks above it, but it also cannot collide with any mobs that are already in the area. So the new zombie's hitbox cannot intersect with this guy's hitbox that's already there. But this would be a problem with our zombie in the center, because this green block would try to place the zombie in the exact same location as the zombie that's getting hit. So typically this location would always fail. But reinforcement zombies are a little bit strange. They don't spawn in the very center of a block, but instead will actually spawn in the northwest corner of the block. So they end up having the very center of them being in the exact corner of the block. Which means if the initial zombie that you attacked was slightly over into this corner of the block, then their 2 hitboxes would not intersect, allowing this zombie to also spawn in. So we can actually see this in this example here. We have the zombie off to a corner, leaving the northwest corner open up over here. So that as soon as he starts getting attacked, there is a probability that we're going to get a new zombie to spawn directly in this corner here. And there you go, you can see it happen. And we got another guy too. As long as this corner is freed up, that there's no other zombies with their collision inside of it, then new zombies can actually spawn in there. But there is a downside to this, and that is they will not spawn in reinforcements if there is a player within 7 blocks of the main zombie. But being 7 blocks away from them is a problem, because for us to do the sweeping attack of the sword, we need to be somewhat close to these guys. But because we're trying to apply damage to so many zombies at once, while still getting looting, it's just much easier for the player to be close up and whacking at these guys. So since we don't use the green, in order to replace it, we'll have to use pretty much an entire row of yellow to do the same probability as the green. This will be worth it as using a sword will be much easier. Now in our example here we have zombies, but if we want to get copper, we'll want to have drowns. But they've recently changed it so that when drowns summon in reinforcements, they will no longer summon in normal zombies as reinforcements, but instead will summon in the exact same zombie type, being more drowns. This is true for all zombie types, so a normal zombie will spawn in more normal zombies, and villager zombies will only spawn in more villager zombies as reinforcements. And zombified piglins will only spawn in other zombified piglins as reinforcements, where a husk will only spawn in other husks. But because of this, it means that they also will look for extra requirements in order to spawn in reinforcements, such as husk needing sky access, otherwise the reinforcements will actually fail. But we want to have drowns because they give the copper, the tridents, the Nautilus shells, and much more. And for drowns to spawn in, they need to be standing on top of a water source. So we have a water source here, which can also be a waterlogged block that counts. Plus they need to have water in the exact block that their feet are trying to spawn into. And if those 2 requirements are complete, then they'll actually spawn in another drown reinforcement. So after all this testing, code checking, and mathematics, I designed 2 new drown farms with maximum output with minimal building needed. I'll show you how I implemented all these tricks and mechanics into my farm designs while I build it up. Now even though drowns can spawn inside of the ocean biome as well as the dripstone biome, the only biome that they can spawn above the sea level is in a river biome. So we're going to build the farm there so that the player is far enough away that no hostile mobs can spawn anywhere else except directly inside of the farm we build. And you do not have to worry about the new Nautilus mobs spawning inside the farm, as they do not spawn in river biomes. Now because we cannot get infinite drowns like we used to in the past, and that's why we have to add in new drowns into the system that come from naturally spawned in, rather than depending on reinforcements 100% of the time. And the way that the math works out when it comes to these reinforcement collie zombies they're given these negative stats which prevent them from infinitely spawning in more zombies. So with this farm, you can decide to either run the farm with no reinforcements, such as like a normal difficulty, or you can run it with reinforcements which greatly increase the amount of items per hour. And could I get a like on the video for finally finishing this farm after 7 years? Now, it really does help to find the right type of river biome in order to build the farm. You want to find one that is wide, has to be at least 21 by 21, and you want the terrain on the sides of the river to be relatively flat. So you don't have to put down as many torches to spawn-proof the rest of the area. Now, when choosing the chunk of river that you're going to build the farm in, you do need to make sure that there is an actual river biome here, because if we pull up the F3, we can see that the biome here is actually a desert and not a river, meaning that we would not get any drowns to spawn here. So look for a river that is kind of wide, that's at least 21 blocks wide across. And to make sure it's all river biome, once you have a spot that looks big enough, you can place down some markers and then pull up your F3 and then walk parallel along the river and see if it changes from river biome to something else. And then once you found a 21 block strip of river biome, then count a total of 21 blocks from that marker, and that will be the other corner of the farm. And then we can come back to our original marker and also count out a total of 21 blocks, and that will be the fourth corner, and that will be a total of 21 by 21 block area. And that will fit in the farm, and everything should be river biomes so we get drowns to spawn in. Alternatively, you can use a mod that shows the biome borders, like the mini HUD mod here. Just keep in mind that some of these mods can be a little bit finicky where the borders move as you move. Now we're ready to put in the water, but we're first going to have to go to the southeast corner of our pillars, so the whole farm is directional. This is important because drown reinforcement spawning is directional, and I'll talk more about this later. And you can see the direction here on your F3 menu. And then from this pillar here, we're going to go diagonal to this spot right here. You guys can pillar up with scaffolding if you want to, or whatever blocks you have. And we're going to pillar all the way up to Y level 164. So when you look on your F3 menu and you look at the actual block that you're scaffolding with, it will show up as target block being 164, or your foot level is going to be at 165. Now from here, we're going to build in the direction of the other pillars, and we're going to build in a little water cascading thing that's going to push all the mobs that are over here over to the central area. We're going to start out by first putting it in the cobble wall, which is going to go here, and we're also going to use this block as part of the build, so you can switch that out. Place a block there, and placing in a block here as well as a soul sand block on top of this will prevent some messy water later on. Then on this side, we're going to put in a temporary block here as well as here. And then we're going to put on an additional 5 blocks onto this here. Use some type of block that you can easily remove, like dirt, which will get us flowing water on top of a big block of water. And then on this other side, we're going to go an additional 4 blocks. And now we'll fill in this area with blocks so that it turns into a nice little square, with one side a little bit longer than the other. Now on the side that is towards the other 2 pillars, and the short side, we're going to go up a block, and we're going to take it across this full length, and then we're going to take it a total of 7 blocks, so 6 more onto this, and then we're going to fill in this area so it's also a little rectangle. So now that we have another rectangle that is on the west side of this one, we're going to build one that is on the north side. We're going to start over here in this corner, and we're going to go up 1 block, and we're going to take it the full length of both these little sections here. And then on this side, we're going to do a total of 8. And now fill in this 13 by 8 area with your temporary block. So now it should look like this. Now we're going to go into the farthest top corner, and we're going to go up again. And we're going to take this row all the way across the full length as the other 2. And then we're going to take the other side a total of 7. And then we're going to fill in this area. And then once again, we're going to go to the top upmost corner, and we're going to put in a block here. And we're going to take this one the full length of the current build. And then we're once again going to take this one out 7 blocks and then fill this in. And if you made it this far, you just finished the hardest part of the main part. Now it should look like this. And if you come over here and come to this corner and look straight down and you zoom in, you should be perfectly lined up with that marker on the other side. Now we're going to fill this whole thing in with water sources, but we're going to do this a really easy way. We're first going to go over here to this corner, and we're going to place in a source right here. It's going to make 2 flowing water. Then we're going to skip over to here, and we're going to do this pattern across this entire side. You can either use a infinite water source that you have up here, or you can use ice blocks, but you'll need to have a block underneath in order for it to produce water when you break it down. Put the corner one right here so that it hangs over a little bit. And now we're going to go to the opposite corner over here, and we're going to do the same thing, placing in a source here and skipping, and we're going to do this across the entire thing. And then once we get here, we're just going to hop up to the next level. So when you're done, it should look like this. Did you know for the last 9 years, I've been designing all my Minecraft farms live over at my Twitch streams with their archived videos on demand over on my second YouTube channel, so drop a subscribe over there. And now we're going to convert all of this flowing water into water sources by coming down to where this pillar is, and we can knock down this pillar. And then we're going to place in our kelp, and we're going to bone meal this until we don't use up any more bone meal. This means that the kelp has reached all the way to the end of the water at the top here. And by it growing into the flowing water, it has converted all the flowing water into water sources. Now we're going to go this direction and continue doing this, but we're going to skip every other one because the sources here and there will make sources in between, so we don't have to do every single one. And we'll continue going this direction until we reach the end and do it to them all. So it's going to look like this, and then when you do get to the very end, the last one should be on this pillar here. We're just going to knock down the pillar a little bit and place it there, and we're going to take that one to the top, and that should convert the very corner into a water source as well. So now this side is complete, and we're going to do the same thing to this side over here, and with water on 2 sides, it should start filling in these corners and filling in this entire area without us having to do too much work. So from the corner here, we can start spacing out our kelp every other block, and we're going to take that all the way to our marker, which is right here. And once again, we're going to knock this down and place a kelp on that, and now we're going to bone meal all these up. But it is going to take quite a bit of bone meal, but I did come up with quite a few different bone meal farms, which I'll put down in the description. You guys can check out whichever one works best. You can always use like the moss farm to collect a bunch of bone meal, or you can even make like a skeleton farm to do this. And to help you do this while you're underwater and so you don't run out of air, you can just place down a door and stand inside of it. That way you can bone meal without having to need a helmet with respiration enchantments or constantly have to restock your air bubbles. Now, if you don't want to waste a lot of bone meal, you can wait for these kelps to just naturally grow up, but that's going to take a lot of time, and they do have a maximum height that they can grow to, so you'd have to reset them by re-breaking their tops. If you don't want to get tons of bone meal and waste it, you can always collect tons of kelp and just swim up and place in the kelp. You can even knock down your previously built up ones and then collect those items in order to do the next ones, because once they've grown, they've already made the sources, so you don't need them anymore. So as I put in the last kelp, you can see how it makes sources, and then the game will automatically fill in between blocks that are also sources, so it can make a continuous water source. And that's how we're converting flowing water into water sources, which is what we need in order to put in the bubble columns, which we'll do next. So now that we have all the water in, we can see we're already starting getting some drowns to spawn inside of it. There shouldn't be too many as long as they're building in the daytime. The skylight will prevent them from spawning in most of these spots. So now it's time to put in the soul sand, which will make the bubble columns. We're going to come into one of the edges where the kelp is, right where our marker is, and we're just going to place in soul sand on the bottom of the river. And we're going to take this all the way across until we reach the other marker that we still have, which is right here. So this is the actual old marker, and this is where we scaffold up. So just want to make sure we have soul sand somewhere on here. It doesn't have to be at the very bottom of the world, as we're only going to be using everything above the water line. So it doesn't even have to be neatly placed in. And then from this marker, we're going to go back towards the kelp again, once again placing in the soul sand until we get to the other marker. And now we have it on 2 sides, and now we need to remove this kelp here and start placing in soul sand going this direction towards our other marker. And then once we get here, we're going to finish off our square by removing the last line of kelp and putting in it with some soul sand. And now it should look like this with the soul sand around the edge. And now we can fill this whole thing in with the soul sand blocks. You can either place them directly onto the ground, or if you want to, you can place them in nice neat rows. So with the whole area filled in with soul sand, it's going to start making bubble columns. These are the ascending bubble columns. meaning any mobs that would spawn inside of here are just going to get pushed all the way up to the very, very top. And because drowns act differently in daytime versus nighttime inside of water, it's good to have the bubble columns to force them to the top rather than depending on their pathfinding AI. Now we're going to swim up to the top where the platform is, and we're actually going to place in blocks right where we placed in the water sources before. We're going to go ahead and run this across this side here, and then this side we're going to do the same thing, placing in it right here all the way to the edge, and then we're going to take it down, and then we're going to run it across here as well. And now when we get done, we're going to have a nice big platform. And this is where we're going to put in a new source of water that's going to push all the mobs to the lowest point over there. We're going to start building in walls to hold in this flowing water. So here where the wall is, we're going to place a block here, and we're going to start putting an edging around this whole dirt area. You can use any solid block that doesn't allow light to go through it. And then whenever you come to dirt, we're just going to go up and over it, and we're going to do this around the entire thing. So the first half should look like this, going up and over, going all the way around to this corner here. And then on the opposite side, we're going to do the same thing. Just make sure to place in a block here, and then we'll do the whole edging thing once again. So when you're done, it should look like this. Now at this point, we're going to bring up these lower walls to the same height as these over here. So we're going to start filling these walls in. So now it will look like this, and we'll fill in this one as well, but leaving the spot with the wall empty. Now before we put in the cascade of water, we need to do a couple things to prevent the water from making infinite water sources. We're going to put in a gate here, which is going to hold back the water. And over in this corner here, we're also going to put in another open gate here. And then in this corner here, we're going to knock out these two blocks, place in a block here, and then fill this back in again, remove this one, and we're going to place in a sign here just to interrupt the water. And then we're going to waterlog it. While you're here, remove the block that's in this corner here, if you haven't already. That will update all of these blocks over here and make this flow. And also break the block that is behind this gate right here. Now update the water over here and make it flow. And underneath of this one, there might be that scaffolding block. You want to remove that one, and then place that back there. And this will update the water over here, so it should flow across to this. Now we're going to come to the top here, and we're going to place in a water source in the corner, and then a water source every other one. Or you can always place in ice. We just need to get a full row of water sources all the way to this corner here. We're going to leave this one barren. And then we're going to do the same thing right here. And then when we're done, we should have 2 rows that are pushing all the drowns this direction. Now if we place a source right here, it should fill in the rest of that and bring it out to the edge. Now we have every single spot on here being pushed over this direction. If you ever need help on any of my farms, you can always leave a new comment under the related video, or you can hop into my Discord where I have a help channel where you can leave your questions or even help out answer others. And if you're not part of my Discord community, what are you guys waiting for? Now you want to take your good shovel and start removing the dirt, starting from the lowest layer and moving upwards. Depth strike boots will help you so you can fight against the current. You can see that as I removed this layer, it all of a sudden has started to redirect this water, so it pushes the mobs through the corner. Now if you do have a bunch of drowns in here, you can always leave the area so that they'll despawn. And that way you don't have to fight them. Now with this next layer removed, you can see it also turned this water source, pushing them that direction. And now let's do the last 2. So now the water should look like this. So now to fix it so the mobs don't get stuck there, we're going to come over to here. And on the side of this block here, we're going to place a block there and one right here, and then we're going to remove that block. That's going to update the water and make it so that they push that direction. And then we're going to come over to here. We're going to place in a block up against this side, as well as one right here to update that water, make it push all the mobs to this corner over here. So by using flowing water, we can bring them all to a central location without having to use any turtle eggs to try to make them pathfind over there. And I'm not using any nether portals, as this will keep the build simpler overall, but also they don't work in multiplayer servers because as soon as hostile mobs go into a different dimension without a player nearby, they will instantly despawn. So now all the water should be pushing everything to here. If you have a temporary block, you can remove that one. Now we're going to come to the edge of this. We're going to place a block on this side here. And then we're going to place in a soul sand on top of that. And that should stop the water from flowing out. From here, we're going to place in another wall right here. Then we're going to make this wall big so mobs are unlikely to fall through the holes in it. Then we're going to take either side of this all the way to the top of this, and also on this side over here. And then for where this hole is, we're going to take it up 2 blocks on each of these sides, and then put a block on top of it. And then take the rest of this so it's leveled with everything else. And then from up here, we're going to fill in these 3 blocks right there. And then we're going to extend this little tube a total of 20 blocks upwards. And if you did it correctly, the top block, when you look at it, should say target block 190 Y level. And we'll eventually have the drowns getting piped up this hole here. So now we're high enough up so that the player themselves isn't stopping mobs from spawning in the farm. And if we compare this to the bubble where mobs can spawn in, which is this really big bubble here, you can see that mobs can spawn as far as 128 blocks away from the player here, but they won't be able to spawn outside this bubble. So any mob that's farther than this, they will immediately despawn. And this is why we have the farm at this height, in order so that the mobs can spawn down here inside of the farm. But we don't want the spawn sphere to be any lower, otherwise they will start spawning into the nearby river biome that we have around the farm. So with a setup like this, we can force all the mobs to spawn directly inside, and we don't have to worry about putting in any light sources to prevent drowns from spawning in the river. But we do need to place in some torches on all the land, which is either leveled with the sphere or is sitting within it. You can see I just spammed a bunch of torches and that removed all the mobs here. And we also got a little bit of land popping out of here that we placed in some torches. But you do gotta be careful that Endermen don't actually move the block underneath of the light and destroy it, allowing hostile mobs to spawn here once again in the dark. And you can see that any drowns that happen to get pushed out of the farm, as soon as they go below the red line, they immediately despawn. And this is why we build the farm above the river biome rather than trying to build the farm inside of the river biome or underneath of it, because then we'd have to deal with mobs spawning in all the crazy amount of caves that are underground. So even though the drowns will spawn slightly slower when they are spawning this high up in the world, compared to if you would have the drown farm at the very bottom of the world, it is so much better in order to keep the farm simple. I do have this alternative bubble column to transport the drowns from down below to up above that will produce way more loot per hour, but you can see it's a bit more complicated to build up. So I'll just continue to show you how to build the simple version. Now, during the making of this video, I did come up with this slightly easier system for the killing chamber that uses this cauldron and this wall here. But some of the video was recorded showing the old system, but don't worry, the information is still useful. So now let's build the AFK killing chamber. We'll start out by placing in blocks for the player to stand on top of, and then we're going to hold the player in with this block over here. And then the player is going to be up against this chest here, also aligned in this corner right here. Then they're going to be clicking through the hole of the cauldron right there. But we're also going to have an option for our armor stand, which we're going to put on top of this wall here. And we're going to hold back future water with this trapdoor. And we'll put a trapdoor over here so we can look through it. And then on the other sides, we'll build these sides up like so. With this top layer, we're going to have some flowing water later on. We're going to hold it in on 2 sides, and it's going to be waterlogged into this slab here. Then it's going to flow over into this spot and over top of a hopper, which is going to put their loot inside of a chest. So we're going to put it in a chest here as well as here. And then we're going to have hoppers going into them. You can always expand upon the storage here. And then a slab on top of it will sort away the items away from potential babies, which will get stuck in here. But before we close off the top, we want to go down in here and place in all the water. Once again, if you have drowns, if you just walk to the bottom of the farm and come back up again, they should despawn. And down here, we're going to place in a sign or a banner here as well as here. Then we're going to start placing water sources above the soul sand. The first 2 here are going to help pull mobs this direction, help pull them into this bubble column, while the wall there is going to prevent the babies from getting stuck in here. And then we're going to fill in water sources the entire way. If you want to, you can once again use kelp in order to just drop a water source from the top and then grow kelp up to convert it all into sources, or fill the whole thing in with ice and break it from the top down. Now we'll come in and place that waterlogged block in once again. It should have the flowing water there. And then we'll slab the top of this so that baby drowns that get in there can't get out, but the items will float up and land on top of this. We're also going to hold the items in with blocks on either side of it by putting in slabs like this. As well as this will hold in our future armor stand, but we want to have blocks over top of this so that there'll be no sky axis that can reach the players, no phantoms will spawn in. And then lastly, we're going to place in a slab right here for the player to go underneath of. Now that the top is complete, we're going to go down and put on the roof so that the mobs will be in the dark and will actually spawn. So first we're going to fill this whole top thing in with whatever type of slabs you want to, so that mobs can't spawn on top of it, as well as along the edges, so that when you're done it should look like this. Now we want to put a flange around the entire farm. This is because mob spawns can actually start out here and then they can eventually get moved inside, and then they'll check to see if they can actually spawn drowns, which will help the farm produce a little bit more mobs per hour. But we also need to make it dark inside so that the drowns will spawn in here when it's daytime as well as nighttime, so the farm could run 24/7. And because of changes, now drowns need a light level of 0 to spawn, so they need it really dark. We're going to go 1 block away from the actual corner, so right here, and down at this level here, and we're going to go out a total of 13 blocks. And we're going to do the same thing for this corner here, 1 away from the edge right here, and then this side over here. And then we're going to build along this side so that we reach all the way to here. And then we're going to loop around this side here and start building this direction. And then we're going to loop around and go this direction back towards the water elevator. Now we'll go back to these 2 edges and we'll take these out a total of 13 blocks, counting the one that we were placed in, as well as right here. And these 2 sides as well. And lastly, this one right here. So it should look like this, each of them being 13. Now we'll come to this side over here, where we'll come up to this spot, and we'll put in a total of 12 blocks here since it's a little bit shorter, with it being occupied with the water elevator. So now we have 4 quadrants, and we're going to fill these quadrants in with slabs. That makes a dark area, so the mobs will spawn in the farm. This is much easier than coming in and building walls to keep all the light out of the farm. So now it will look like this. Now we're going to actually fill in between the corners. So right in the corner, we're going to go in 1, then out 1, then in 1, out 1, and we're going to do this all the way to the other side. And if we did it correctly, it should end so that it lines up with the one on the opposite. Now we'll fill this in and do it to the other 3 corners. So now it should look like this. And now we're going to come in and just block off this last spot so no light comes in. Place in blocks all the way around this whole edge. So now it should be completely dark inside so that drowns can spawn and start getting pushed towards the bubble columns up here and get sent up to where the player will be AFKing, and then you can actually kill them. And if you like simple yet efficient automatic farms, you'll definitely like my channel, so make sure to subscribe, as I got an automatic farm for every single item. Now if you don't have a elytra to get up and down on the farm, you can knock out this block here, and this will connect up with the scaffolding that we placed in earlier. You can just place ladders from the bottom of the world to the top, but to stop light from going through, we will have to block it when you're not using it. And then you can also place ladders up here, and then you can just wind these ladders in to get up to your AFK spot. And the AFK spot is going to be in here. We're going to be standing right up in this corner, so you can kind of see how my hitbox is up against the chest here as well as the cauldron. And there's 2 ways you can operate it. You can either swing directly at the drowns through the hole of the cauldron. Now you'll have to crouch in order to use this hole in the bottom of the cauldron. Now you can make yourself stay crouched just by placing a block above you that's a slab. Or you can just come into your settings in the newer versions and go into your controls and change the sneak to toggle here. And now when you tap sneak, you'll just automatically be kept into the crouching mode. And then you can attack through here. And I used the cauldron's hole so that the hole is really small so that the drowns cannot throw their tridents and hurt you. Or you can place in an armor stand by clicking up against this block here, and this will place it on top of this wall here. And then when you attack the armor stand, it will do the sweeping from the sword and apply it to all nearby mobs, meaning that your damage is going to go to all the drowns over there and eventually kill them. We're then going to use a wooden sword to do the least amount of damage as possible to these guys to encourage them to spawn in reinforcements into the bottom of the farm. And reinforcements being spawned in the northwest corner is also the reason why we built the entire farm with the northwest corner being on that side of the player. This helps inside of the actual water down here, so that when a drown gets spawned in, it will actually spawn on this side of the water block rather than spawning on this side, because if it spawned on this side, it would get pushed up by the bubble columns and it just hit its head onto this block here. And then the flowing water on the edge would just push it out and it would just fall all the way downwards until it despawned. Now we can still get drowns that will spawn in this little flowing water that's on the edge. As you can see, when they do spawn here, they end up just going up and then getting pushed back out again. But if you really want to stop these guys from spawning, you could just put in a wall against this entire side here and do this on all 4 sides to remove this extra flowing water. But it's so much easier to just build the farm with the water flowing downwards rather than building walls, which takes a ton of materials. And because we have water sources over here for the bubble columns, there's no way to stop the water from trying to flow outwards without actually filling it all in. Now the downside to having mobs spawn in here and slowly fall downwards is that they do take up the mob cap, as we can only have 70 hostile mobs at any given time in the world. Any hostile mobs that are not actually being taken up to the player are mobs that are just being wasted. But as you can see, we actually have plenty of drowns here, and our main bottleneck is actually just moving them up to the player. But even if we would move these up a bit faster, we have another problem, and that is if we have over 24 drowns up here at any given time, they start taking entity cramming. And entity cramming does a large amount of damage to each of them, meaning that instead of dying really slowly and having a lot of chances to actually spawn in reinforcements down below, because every time they get hit, they don't always spawn in reinforcement, we would instead have these guys end up dying really quickly with only a couple damage hits from the entity cramming, meaning that they would only have a couple chances to spawn in the reinforcements before they would ultimately die. But the goal is to try to kill them as slowly as possible. That way they have the highest chances of actually spawning in their reinforcements if they can. So we want all the damage that is being done to these guys being done by our wooden sword sweeping attack, which only does half a heart every time. So ideally we want to have as much mobs up here as possible without them taking entity cramming, while also having as close to the mob cap worth of hostile mobs in the world at any given time. And as you can see with this farm here, it constantly stays around between 60 and 70 hostile mobs, while barely staying underneath of the 24 mobs in order to not take entity cramming in the killing chamber up here. And getting this balance correctly was difficult, but big thanks to Guitar, who made a mod that would tell us when reinforcements would fail, as well as one that would say if drowns were actually dying from player means rather than entity cramming. And Ofik, who made a death detection mod, as well as one that includes drowns versus items, as well as help with a bunch of different commands, including this one that shows when the mob is not being hurt by player means. Now we could stop entity cramming by placing in something like vines or scaffolding. This would have made the killing chamber more complicated, and overall I'm trying to keep this design simple, as I already have a more complicated and much faster and efficient farm that I will be showing in the future. But for the simpler farms, the wooden sword will want to have mending. That way your sword will never break, despite it having not very much durability. Having unbreaking will also let you get more XPs in the player's XP bar, rather than needing to repair the sword. And looting 3 will help you get more items per hour, but out of the 3 enchantments, mending is one you definitely need if you want to AFK this. You do not actually want to have the sweeping edge enchantment, because that will actually kill them too quickly. By doing the sweeping attack, we're going to do 4 damage to the mob that we're actually aiming at, but all the rest of the mobs that are inside are also going to get 1 damage as well. But while the player is in this location, we're also close enough to actually get XPs. Notice I'm picking up the orbs that come from the drowns over there, which is coming through the corner right here. But I'm also close enough to actually kill any baby drowns that end up falling off of their jockeys and end up in the same location as the items over here. But besides picking up just XP orbs, we also pick up rotten flesh. This is going to be important because this is going to be how we're going to keep our player alive. Now if you're playing on easy difficulty or normal difficulty, you won't have to worry about your player starving to death once they run out of hunger. But you also do not get access to zombie reinforcements unless you're playing on hard difficulty. There's also no zombie reinforcements in Bedrock Edition. Now some of the drowns that are inside of here will have the ability to pick up loot. As you can see, like this guy here is holding some rotten flesh. This actually helps with the farm because when other drowns die, they drop items. Those guys pick it up, and as soon as they pick it up, they no longer will count to the mob cap, meaning that we can get more drowns to spawn in. So for the best items per hour, always play on hard. But then we have to find a way to heal the player. This is because whenever you attack something, you will eventually lose hunger because of that. And then once you lose hunger, you'll start taking damage to your health. And unlike in easy or normal difficulty, where your health will only get so low before it stops removing hearts, in hard difficulty, it'll just keep removing hearts until you actually die, even if you never get hit by anything. And this is how you starve to death. So on hard difficulty, we have to find a way to heal the player. And the best way to do this is just by eating rotten flesh that come off of the zombies. Once you fill up your inventory with other stuff, then all the rotten flesh will automatically pile up in your offhand. So if you have the right click button held down, your player will automatically eat it whenever they get hungry, and therefore you never have to worry about starving to death. Now the way you can keep the right click button held down without actually holding it down on your mouse is by first holding down right click, then pressing F3 plus T, and then once this shows up, release your mouse button. So now your player will automatically right click and eat whenever you're hungry. Alternatively, you can use the keybind changes that are in version 1.21.9 and above that will automatically let you hold down buttons without having to do any tricks. Now that we got the automatic eating part completed, we need to work on the actual attacking part. We can't attack too fast, otherwise the sweeping part of the sword won't work. And we don't want to attack too slowly, otherwise we'll get entity cramming deaths from the zombies and we'll lose out on reinforcements. So for this we're going to need an auto clicker. This is the type that I use, but any one that you can set the delay will work. You want to set the timing for 510 milliseconds or higher. If there's lag on the server, just keep setting it higher until you make sure you're actually doing sweeping attacks. And you can notice this because all the zombies will turn red. If only one zombie turns red, it means it's not actually sweeping. And then you can go ahead and turn it on, and that way it can attack really fast for you without you having to sit there and manually click. Now there is some downside to this because when you're eating, you're not attacking, so you are lowering the amount of items per hour that you get just by a little bit. And since we're eating such poor food, we end up having to eat quite a bit, which we could fix by like giving the player some chicken that comes from a chicken farm. But we're also losing out on clicks whenever the zombie that we're attacking dies and blocks our view from being able to hit the zombies in the back, as there is a 1-second death animation. This is why sometimes it seems like the player is missing despite aiming right at these guys. But this problem can be solved by using the armor stand that we put up here. The downside is we will have to use a beacon, and then we'll just turn on the same auto clicker at the same speed and just whack at the armor stand. This will then do nearby sweeping damage to the mobs that are inside the farm. This helps with all the problems previously, including an additional one being that the sword that attacks the initial mob is going to do the 4 damage, but now since we're automatically attacking the armor stand, every mob inside is going to get the smallest amount of damage possible, being just 1 damage each, meaning that there's a higher chance of getting reinforcements inside of the farm. Now the reason why you will need to have a region beacon is because if you try to eat with food in your offhand, when you're pointing towards the armor stand, it thinks you're trying to put the food into the armor stand slot. So you're unable to actually right click and eat your food. So you either have to move the player away so you can eat, or we're going to have to come in with a beacon, which will give you regen so that you never have to starve to death. But since beacons are really expensive, you guys can choose what type of system you want to run. Now when operating the farm in single player, make sure you have your video settings with your rendered instance no lower than 5 chunks. Because if you go lower, then pillager patrols will spawn in and get stuck in unloaded chunks, as well as wandering traders and their llamas. And it turns out they try to fight each other even when some of them are in unloaded chunks, causing thousands of llama spits or arrows to get stuck in unloaded chunks. Plus the pillager patrols will hold up the hostile mob cap. Now to increase the item per hour even further, we can add in more areas for the zombies to spawn in reinforcements. We're going to do this by coming down here, placing in a block, and if you look at this block, it will say targeted block at Y level 187. And then from here we're going to go out a total of 3 blocks. They're going to put in a 2x2 that's going towards the rest of the farm. Then we're going to go up and put 2 blocks. And then this one we're going to go for a total of 5 across. Then we're going to put in 2 temporary blocks. Then we're going to go a total of 8 going this direction. And 2 more temporary blocks. Then we're going to go another 8 blocks so that we get to here. And then from here we're going to put in 2 more temporary. And then we're going to do a total of 7. And this will take us to the end. Now we're going to finish this floor out where we have these temporary blocks. We're going to place in some water just so we can swim down here. And we're going to place 2 blocks underneath of this. Then we go ahead and remove our water source. And we're going to do this for the other two. 2 blocks there, and then 2 blocks there. Now from here, we're able to reach down and replace in a magma. If you don't want to bother grabbing magma, that's fine. It just marginally helps with the rates by killing babies that get potentially stuck inside of the cobble wall, which we'll place on top of that. And then we'll prevent light from going inside by putting blocks on all sides of the wall. And then we're going to fill in this tube because we're going to eventually place water in here to help move the babies across. Now I'll do the same thing to these other two. So with those complete, we're going to come back over here. We're going to go up 5 on top of this so that you come up to here. And then we're going to take these 5 blocks across the full distance of the farm to make a wall to keep it dark inside. So now it will look like that. We're going to go to the opposite side. And then right here, we're going to take just a single high row all the way across the entire length of the farm. And now we're going to go and to the side and over one and put in a double wall across the full length. Once that's in, we're going to come in and with a temp block and move over one. And then we're going to put in a single row going across the entire length. And then from here, we're going to come in and place in another row that is over top of the initial 2. And we're going to also take this one the full length of it. Now we'll go to the far end and we'll just cap this off by closing off all the blocks that are exposed here. The full height of it, so it should look like this. And we won't put the roof in at the moment. We'll keep it exposed to light so you don't have any mobs spawning in there while you're working on it. This little spot's eventually going to spawn the mobs, and then this is going to be a little corridor where we move them to the killing chamber. So for this corridor spot, we're going to put in a 2 high wall that's going to go from the spawning spot to our killing chamber over here. We're going to have to place blocks here and also here. We'll eventually remove those 2 blocks. We'll keep it closed for now. And we're going to do this to the other side as well. Come up to here, and then we're going to go around this piece and make it too tall like this. Now we're going to put a roof on top of this. It's going to come up to here. We're then going to place blocks in right here, and then a block here, and then we're going to take up this 2 blocks. Then we're going to come in and place blocks there as there, and also here to close off so no light goes in from this side. Now we're going to bring this across like that. Now we're going to build up this side for 3 blocks there, as well as here. And then we're going to do 3 blocks plus 1 right there to close it off so no light should get into the farm. Now on the inside over here, we're going to start placing in a platform with some slabs. These slabs are where the drowns will actually spawn on top of. Once we get them across the entire distance, we'll eventually waterlog these, but first we're going to put in all the easy blocks. This means we need to hold up the water with some banners, or you can use signs. And we're going to put this across at this height across the entire length of the farm. And then we'll place one down here as well as here and up and over here. Now we're going to go back and right above this wall here on this blank spot, we're going to place a banner there. And we're going to do the same thing for this water spot and this one as well. Now we're ready to waterlog all of these slabs here. If you're using ice, you can put the ice in first and break it all to produce water, and then come in and place in all the slabs. Otherwise, if you place a source here and here, it's going to create an infinite source in between, which you can grab with your bucket and then place another one here and just continue this process. Now that those are water sources, we can use that water to come up above and place water sources in here. Once again, grab between 2 water sources to get infinite source, and then place it in above you on this block. If you're using ice, it's pretty simple to place in all the ice and just break it. And once again, you use a method where you place a source 2 blocks away from another source, and it'll make an infinite source in between. And we just want to make sure this whole thing is sources. And then we're going to do this to this backside over here by grabbing water sources here and then placing them up here. The only problem is here we do have to do every single one. Otherwise, they're not going to make sources in between. So with all of this full, we're going to have spawn in drowns on top of this water that is waterlogged. So their feet are going to be here, their heads are going to be up here, and they're going to get pushed out. But we can also get babies that are going to spawn in drowns and their drowns are going to be a little bit higher because babies are a little bit higher, so they're going to end up spawning up in this water stream up here, and they're once again also going to get pushed out. And chicken jockeys that also spawn in here will get pushed over, with the drowns on top either getting dismounted or they will suffocate so that there's just chickens here. And the chickens will get moved over enough so that they will no longer be in the area where the new drowns are spawning. That way they aren't stopping new drowns from spawning in these spots over here. And these jockey chickens will despawn if they are greater than 24 blocks away from the player, as this is one of the special properties that jockey chickens do have. But when they're by themselves like this, they don't actually hold up the hostile mob cap. Now that they all get pushed out, they're going to fall into another source, which we're going to place here, and this is going to push them just because they don't actually pathfind very well, depending on if it's nighttime or daytime. And this water just guaranteed that they get pushed to the far side. And then with the water on all 4 of those spots, it's going to take us all the way to here. And then from here, we're going to place in a water source in this corner, and this is going to push us all the way to here. And right behind this is the bubble columns, which we're using to transport the mobs into our killing chamber. So what you're going to do is just knock out this block, place in your sign or banner, same thing for up here. And if you happen to have some packed ice, you can place them there, but it'll only help the rates marginally. Now to help get drowns across this hole here, we're going to knock out a block on the other side. Then you want to hop out of the farm, come around to the opposite side over here. And then we're going to place blocks here and here, and we're going to use this flowing water to pull the reinforcements that come from that side into our bubble elevator. But there is a small chance that a baby zombie will get stuck in here, so we'll just put some magma. If you don't have it, you can just skip that part. And then we're going to close this off so that it now looks like this inside. So now that we got all of that completed, we can come in and place the roof in last. We're going to place in 2 blocks like this, and we're going to take these 2 all the way across the entire farm. So now that the roof is in place, it's going to be dark enough inside here for the hostile mobs to spawn, as it does need to be a light level of 0, even to spawn in reinforcements. Now that we place in all these blocks, we do need to make sure that they are spawn proof. You guys can do this by placing in light. Just make sure that on top of all this, there's a light level of at least 1 so mobs cannot spawn. Or you can always put like slabs on top of it. Now if you want even more items per hour, you can take the wing that we just made and you can replicate it, but it has to be mirrored, and you can have it pointing off on this side of the farm. This will allow it so that reinforcements can spawn not only in these water sources, but it can also give them higher opportunity and have them spawn over here. The only difference is that this little hook piece here is also lowered a little bit. That way, when the 2 sides push their mobs into the central bubble columns, they're not pushing up against each other, but rather can get inside more easily. And here you can see how both drowns are getting pushed into the bubble columns, and how they're not really colliding with each other, so they have plenty of room to keep the whole system moving so they don't clog up. And those spawning wings are in direct correlation with the yellow ones here, being the exact length as well as width and height in order to perfectly let drowns spawn in. And just with a single wing, you have a 85% chance of a reinforcement being successful. But by having 2 wings, you have a 98% chance. With 3 of them, you have a 99.7% chance. Where having 4 of them will give you a 99.96%. So the closer you get to 100%, the more and more spawning spaces you need. So like in the example, they can spawn them in that direction, as well as this one and this one. The reason why I did not put wings over top of the farm, because the more blocks that are above the farm, the more the game has to check to try to spawn in hostile mobs, which will end up reducing the amount of drowns that actually spawn inside of the water down below. So it's better to hang them off of edge where we're not trying to get any hostile mobs to spawn underneath of them. So this design of the farm with 2 wings, we got both wings to help us. Plus, we also have the water that's down underneath. This is because where the zombies are getting killed, they're trying to place in some of the reinforcements down here in the big red area, which intersects with some of this water area down below. And because the drowns are right over here, when they get attacked, they also do end up putting some of the reinforcements against this side over here, which corresponds with them spawning them inside of this orange area. And unlike zombies, which need to have a nice solid block in order to spawn on top of, mean that if we wanted zombies to actually spawn in this orange area, we'd have to space a block that they could spawn on top of, and then put in 2 air gaps and a block they could spawn in, and then repeat this downwards to get the highest probability. When it comes to drowns, we just fill the entire thing up with water. They can spawn in any of the blocks. And because we know how much water each of these has for reinforcements to spawn in, we can actually calculate the chance that a reinforcement will succeed. So with just a simple version of the farm without having any of the 2 wings, there's only a 48% chance that reinforcement will spawn every time a mob gets hit. But if you build 1 wing onto it, then it jumps it up from 48% all the way up to 92%. And if you add a second wing onto it, then it jumps it all the way up to about 99%. And when it comes to the design, that is a simple version with a little bit more complicated water elevator. Despite not having 2 wings, it will still have a 92% chance of reinforcements succeeding, which directly correlates with the amount of items per hours these produce. Not only do you get tridents off of the drowns as well as their copper, but you can also get the chance of their fishing rods, which can be enchanted. The tridents can also be enchanted with really nice stuff. They of course drop a lot of rotten flesh, but if they're holding Nautilus shells, they also drop those. And jockeys will drop raw chicken as well as their feathers because of the chickens, and you might get some squids in the system producing ink sacs. So the simplest design will produce around 10,000 items per hour, with 600 of them being copper ingots, with the hybrid design producing over 13,500 items per hour, with 850 of those being copper ingots. With the simple design with 2 wings built onto it, producing almost 15,000 items per hour, with almost 1,000 of them being the copper ingots. It also produced around 170 Nautilus shells per hour, as well as 44 tridents and 32 fishing rods. You also get some feathers and rotten flesh with the chickens that come into the system, and you get some XPs, where it produces over 31,500 XPs per hour. And this video is brought to you for free by my supporters. Big thanks to them, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye!